Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man.
So you want to target the middle-class people, and you're willing to live with the rich people paying the taxes.
And I don't want to take anyone. In fact, the program that I have gives them a slight tax increase. But the question is, what do you do with the surplus?
Tim, could I mention that I voted against the tax cut. I voted against it because I didn't think there was sufficient relief for working Americans. And I think that events that have transpired since then have validated that vote.
Absolutely right.
I cannot in good conscience vote in favor of tax cuts, irrespective of their size or to which segment of the population they are targeted. Nor can I support any spending increases that are not related to improving our nation's defense from the obvious and serious threats facing us today. Let me stress, however, that I am, like my colleagues, concerned with the weakened state of our economy, and I don't dismiss lightly arguments in support of stimulating our economy with tax cuts. I know the negligible growth in our economy today has left many Americans without work, their investments and savings diminished, with lower standards of living, and that their elected representatives are expected to do something to help alleviate their suffering. I may have concerns that some parts of the administration's proposed tax cuts would not provide the near-term stimulus necessary to strengthen our obviously anemic economic recovery. However, I am certainly willing and even inclined to consider tax cuts that would provide a more immediate stimulus, such as, for instance, a reduction in payroll taxes. But not, Mr. President, at this time. The United States is currently engaged in a global war against terrorism and will in all likelihood soon commence a necessary war to disarm Iraq by destroying the regime of Saddam Hussein. I believe the war in Iraq can be concluded successfully in a relatively brief time, but it's surely possible that the conflict won't meet our best estimates for its probable duration. It might take longer than we hope, or it may exceed our hopes. As any responsible war planner will tell you, it's always wise to expect the unexpected in war. In addition, the costs of our security at home are great and certainly increase over the next few years. The war against al-Qaeda has been significantly successful. The President and his administration deserve great credit for that. But the enemy in our global war against terrorism is not yet vanquished. Speaking as a border state senator, with the challenges to better protect our borders so evident to Arizonans, I am acutely aware of how much more needs to be done to secure our homeland. Mr. President, even without assuming the costs of these various contingencies, particularly the war in Iraq and the responsibilities we will have in that country following the cessation of hostilities, the increase in the federal budget deficit envisioned over the next 10 years ought to concern greatly every member of Congress. In the first 5 months of fiscal year 2003, the U.S. government has already run up a $195 billion deficit. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that even without the President's tax cuts and without further increases in spending for the remainder of the fiscal year, the total budget deficit for 2003 will reach $246 billion. If we add the projected cost this year of the President's tax cuts, the deficit would reach $287 billion. Most alarming are the deficit projections for the next 10 years, incorporating the President's proposed tax cuts released by CBO last week, $1.8 trillion. Mr. President, that's a pretty staggering sum, and it doesn't include any of the costs of our imminent actions in Iraq. We should be concerned about deficits, Mr. President. They limit economic expansion by reducing the amount of national savings available for investment. This raises both interest rates and interest payments on the national debt. Deficits constrain our ability to respond effectively to unanticipated fiscal events. If we don't reduce them, projected long-term deficits will reach dangerous levels, lowering the national income and standards of living for future American generations. That said, Mr. President, I would still be open at some point to proposals to stimulate the economy with tax cuts, but not now. Let us wait until we have succeeded in Iraq, and until we have some idea of what percentage of the costs of the aftermath of those hostilities we will have to bear. The best thing that can be done for the economy today is to win the war in Iraq quickly, completely, and to attract the coalition of partners necessary to help us meet our post-war objectives in that country. That is a far more necessary and responsible stimulus to our economy at this time. And it is far sounder statesmanship than cutting taxes in the dark or running up spending without due regard to our primary responsibility to the American people, their fiscal security.
Senator, things are really heating up now on the campaign trail, so if you don't mind, I want to ask you a domestic policy question, a straight talk question, if you will. In retrospect, was it a mistake for you to vote against the Bush tax cuts?
No, because I had significant tax cuts and there was restraint of spending included in my proposal. I saw no restraint in spending. We presided over the greatest increase in the size of government since the Great Society. Spending went completely out of control. It's still out of control. Wasteful pork barrel and earmark spending is a disgrace, and it caused us to alienate our Republican base. So these tax cuts need to be made permanent, otherwise they would have the effect of tax increases. But look, if we had gotten spending under control, we'd be talking about more tax cuts today.
But Senator, specifically on tax cuts, even though these tax cuts, they help the economy grow, the deficit which you were concerned about at the time has actually gone down. So if you had it to do over again, you would still vote against the Bush tax cuts?
Well, actually the deficit is still significant. The spending is out of control. Corruption is there in Washington because of the wasteful and earmark spending. I say that because we have former members of Congress now residing in federal prison. I fought against the earmark pork barrel spending. I've never received nor asked for one from my state in 24 years. These tax cuts must be made permanent. Yeah.
President Bush made a commitment when he ran for president in 2000 and 2004 that he would oppose and veto any tax increase that Congress sent him. My question to each of the candidates is, would you promise to the people watching this right now that you will oppose and veto any effort to raise taxes as long as you're president?
I have a 24-year record of opposing tax increases and supporting of tax reductions, and no, I like Fred. My pledge and my record is up to the American people, not up to any other organization.
And so please know that I think the worst thing that could happen to America in these very tough economic times, is to raise someone's taxes. I won't do it.